He said, "I'm not ready. If you can't wait, marry someone else." And that was the moment I realized I was being asked to audition for a future that might never come. We were standing in his kitchen, late evening light bleeding through half-closed blinds, striping the floor like prison bars. The ring felt heavier than it had that morning. I had chosen it with certainty. He was choosing hesitation. His voice wasn't cruel. That would have been easier. It was calm. Practical. As if my love were a subscription he wasn't sure he wanted to renew. "If you can't wait, marry someone else." The sentence echoed, metallic and hollow. I watched him avoid my eyes, watched the way his jaw tightened, not with heartbreak but with inconvenience. I told him, evenly, "I love you, but I won't beg or compete for commitment." I slipped the ring off and placed it back in its velvet box. The click of it closing was quieter than my heartbeat, but louder than anything he had said. I was never the dramatic one in our relationship. I was the steady one. The planner, the compromiser, the woman who remembered birthdays and bit her tongue when jokes went a little too far. His family adored me in the way people adore something reliable. Useful, predictable, safe. From the beginning, I fit myself into his life like an adjustable piece of furniture. When he worked late, I adjusted dinner. When he changed cities for a promotion, I transferred my job without complaint. When he said he needed more time, I translated it into patience instead of doubt. What I didn't admit, not even to myself, was how often my certainty was treated like desperation. At family dinners, his mother would laugh and say, "You're so lucky she's willing to wait." As if I were a placeholder holding space until he felt important enough to choose permanence. He spoke about someday the way other men speak about retirement, comfortably distant. And every time I swallowed my discomfort, I told myself love required grace. What I didn't realize was that grace without boundaries becomes permission, and permission slowly turns into invisibility. The tension didn't arrive in a single argument. It collected in small, polished moments that looked harmless from the outside. At dinner with his parents, his aunt once asked when we were setting a date. He smiled lightly and said, "We're not in a rush. She's patient." He squeezed my hand when he said it, a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a leash. Patient. As if waiting were my personality trait. When friends announced engagements, he would clap them on the back and joke, "Brave man." Then he'd glance at me, quick and sideways, measuring my reaction. I learned to keep my expression soft. Supportive. Unthreatening. There were pauses, long ones, whenever I brought up the future. Not arguments. Just silence stretching between us like an unanswered call. He'd nod, say, "We'll see," and change the subject to something practical. Bills. Work. Vacation plans set conveniently 3 months at a time. Once I overheard him tell his brother, "She'll stick around. She's not going anywhere." He said it casually. Confidently. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet realization that I was being treated less like a choice and more like a guarantee. The turning point wasn't when he said he wasn't ready. It was when he added, almost casually, "If you can't wait, marry someone else." There was no fear in his voice. No urgency. Just certainty, the kind that assumes you'll stay no matter what is offered. In that instant, I saw us clearly. Not the version built on hope, but the one built on imbalance. I had been negotiating with myself for years, lowering my expectations in quiet increments so he would never feel pressured. I called it love. He called it comfort. And comfort had made him careless. I looked at his face, familiar, beloved, unbothered, and realized he wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of choosing. The difference mattered. I felt something settle inside my chest. Not anger. Not heartbreak. Just clarity. If I stayed after that sentence, I would be agreeing to a future where my needs were optional. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I told him calmly, "I love you, but I won't beg or compete for commitment." Then I put the ring away. Not to punish him, but to finally stop punishing myself. I didn't block him. I didn't post cryptic quotes. I didn't cry to mutual friends. I made a list. First, logistics. My lease was month to month. I renewed it alone. I separated our shared subscriptions and removed my name from the utilities at his place. I transferred the savings I had quietly contributed toward our future home back into my personal account. Every transaction was documented, dated, clean. Second, boundaries. When his mother texted asking if we had worked through our little misunderstanding, I replied with a single sentence. He told me to marry someone else if I couldn't wait. I respected his wishes. No embellishment. No accusation. Facts carry their own weight. Third, reputation. I declined invitations where I knew he'd be present. Not dramatically, simply unavailable. I updated my professional profiles, accepted a conference panel I'd once postponed for his schedule, and reconnected with mentors I had deprioritized. Silence became my strategy. When his family called an outrage a few days later, shocked that I had ended things so suddenly, I repeated his words back to them verbatim. I won't compete for commitment. There's a peculiar power in restraint. When you don't raise your voice, people are forced to hear what was actually said. The payoff arrived without announcement. His mother asked to meet for coffee. I agreed. She came prepared with concern disguised as correction. He didn't mean it like that, she said softly, stirring her cup though she hadn't added sugar. Men panic. You know how he is. I held her gaze and answered gently, I do know how he is. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply described the moment, the kitchen light, the pause, his exact words. I repeated them the way a witness repeats a statement in court. If you can't wait, marry someone else. Silence spread across the table. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like the patient girl who would endure. She was calculating what her son had gambled. A week later, he called. His voice was different, thinner, stripped of certainty. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I know, I replied. That was it. No accusation. No reopening of negotiations. The consequence wasn't dramatic. It was permanent. He had tested whether I would stay without being chosen. And I had answered by choosing myself. The fallout was quiet, but it moved through his family like a crack in glass. His sister stopped liking my photos. His aunt sent a careful message that began with, "We're so disappointed this didn't work out." Not disappointed in him. In the outcome. As if love were a scheduling conflict. Mutual friends began asking him questions he wasn't prepared for. What happened? Why didn't you just commit? I wasn't there to defend myself anymore, which meant he had to explain the sentence he'd once delivered so confidently. He tried to soften it. I just needed time. Time, I've learned, sounds reasonable until someone refuses to donate theirs. At gatherings, I was no longer introduced as the patient one. I was the woman who walked away. The tone changed. Less pity. More caution. Because when someone leaves calmly, it unsettles people. It forces them to examine their own compromises. The real stakes weren't the wedding or the ring. They were about self-worth. If you stay where you're not chosen, you teach people how to treat you. If you leave without drama, you teach them something else entirely. And people notice lessons delivered without shouting. In the weeks that followed, the silence stopped feeling sharp and started feeling spacious. For the first time in years, my future didn't revolve around someone else's readiness. I rearranged my apartment. Traveled alone for a weekend without checking anyone's schedule. Said yes to opportunities one used to postpone. The absence of negotiation felt unfamiliar at first, then liberating. He reached out twice more. The second time, he said he was ready now. The words landed differently than they once would have. Readiness offered after loss isn't the same as readiness offered with courage. I didn't feel anger when I declined. I felt alignment. Loving him had never been my weakness. Shrinking for him had been. I used to think commitment was proven by endurance, by how long you could wait without complaint. Now I understand it's proven by reciprocity. By being chosen without persuasion. Maybe one day I will marry. Maybe I won't. But I know this. The next time someone stands in front of me, they won't be deciding whether I'm worth choosing. They'll already know. And if they don't, I will walk away. Not as a threat, not as revenge, but as a woman who finally understands that silence can be the loudest boundary of all.